I'm Tony Celaya. I'm with Cascadia Composers, a Portland-based group of composers who present concerts in the Portland area. I'm here in Oakland, California. This is the second in a series of what we anticipate will be interviews with Cascadia composers and trying to give the listener a little introduction to their music and to the composer as a person and how and why they write what they write. Today, we are doing the second of our interviews. We are here with Mike Shu, who is an early member of Cascadia Composers and is based in Portland, Oregon. Good morning, Mike.
Morning, Antonio.
Would you mind giving us just a synopsis of your musical career?
Yeah, sure. So I am not a professional musician, but I did begin violin studies at age 3. And, I took, I think, 12 years of private lessons. I also started piano at age 4 and took 9 years of private lessons there. I was involved with, local youth symphonies, including the Chicago Youth Symphony Orchestra. I served as concertmaster my junior year in college or in high school. And then I went on to study biology and East Asian studies and went on to med school. So I didn't continue any formal studies after that. About the only other education I received formally was a required symphonic century class in college. And that actually taught me quite a bit about the, concerto or sonata form and other basic compositional techniques that were used in the 19th century. In terms of, so I continued to play, I continued to perform. I never really let the violin go at all. So I've been involved with basically symphonies or chamber groups through my entire life. Currently, I'm involved with the Amplified Repertory Chamber Orchestra of Portland. And in terms of compositional career, so I think, basically it's all been, personal ad hoc kind of compositional writing. I was commissioned just a few times locally for small chamber pieces. And then the largest commissioned piece I wrote was Synchronicity in 2003 for 2004 for the Puget Sound Symphony Orchestra. So yeah, that's, I guess, a brief summary of my musical career right there.
Now, when I go on, there are a number of your pieces which are all very interesting and very engaging on YouTube. And some of them are listed a group called ARCO PDX. Is that a group you founded?
That's right. That's the Amplified Repertory Chamber Orchestra of Portland, ARCO.
ARCO. I'm terrible with acronyms.
No worries. My brother thinks it stands for a gas station near the airport. So.
Oh, well, and so you're composer, violinist, and impresario as well. Now, ARCO PDX, do you usually put on your concerts do you usually put them on in the usual concert halls where new music is heard?
No. So we try to take it to places where the average, say, pop or rock music fan would go. Before the pandemic, we were using Holocene quite a bit. And down in Eugene, we would use Cosmic Pizza, which is kind of a local folk and rock and dance music venue. So yeah, we try to take it out of the concert hall because I guess that particular group is dedicated to letting the average person appreciate it, because the average person actually doesn't want to sit down for a couple hours or an hour and a half and listen through an entire concert. That's not comfortable for them. So yeah.
And do you ever you sometimes, I understand, mix, you'll throw a piece of Bach or Vivaldi in among your pieces and pieces by other area composers?
Right. So yeah, our group, actually, the core members, there are only maybe like half a dozen core members. It's not a very large group. So we were limited in terms of our ability to tackle romantic music, right? In terms of the orchestration and stuff. So we kind of had the two extremes, the Baroque which is string heavy and a little harpsichord, maybe one or two winds, and then some contemporary music, which is written, sometimes for those kind of ensembles. So yeah, we try to make the program have some sort of theme as well.
You're a working physician.
Correct.
And as a matter of fact, I saw your pain relief video, or you have at least one thing advising people how to avoid back pain, I noticed online, which is very interesting. And I'm going to, I fortunately have not been having troubles with back pain, but I intend to pick up some of your practices there. But as a working physician, and you've got a small child,
right?
Those things keep you pretty busy.
That's right.
How do you manage to write? How do you manage to write music for ARCO PDX?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely the small child has put a hamper on my compositional productivity in recent years. But in terms of juggling the career and composing and performing and stuff, I happen to have actually a very quote unquote easy job. I don't have to take call, so my sleep is not disrupted for that reason. I have 8 to 5 office hours, and so relatively speaking, so my specialty is physiatry, physical medicine and rehabilitation, and it's my particular practice is all outpatient. It's procedural heavy, so just you do an injection or you do a nerve conduction study, and that's it. I do consultations, of course, as well, but I don't have, say, 1,000 patients that are sending me emails and phone calls every day like the primary care doctors, and I'm not in the hospital taking calls. So so that's one reason I can juggle it. Another reason is I usually only compose when I'm really inspired to. And so I go in phases where maybe a couple times a year where I decide, okay, I really have to write this piece. And my approach is I don't have time to do like a through composition or like, something super technical when it comes to like, using different techniques and so forth. I only know a few techniques of composition that—
I don't think that's true.
Okay. Well, my approach is, I try to keep it simple. So as a physician, one of the things that I think is a commonality between my work as a physician and my hobby as a composer is I approach it pretty practically. I mean, it's a little bit difficult to think as a composer that you're going to approach it practically, but I do. And so I came up with a simple rule of thumb. I'm going to identify the melodies that are in my head. This may happen to you too, like you wake up with a melody that you're like, oh yeah, that needs to be written down. I identify several melodies that can come together in various sections. I identify the motifs. I write down, okay, this melody can be made up of, you can break it down into these 3 or 4 motifs. I list them. And then I think of the moments that are going to be cherishable in that piece. Okay. And so then I have kind of an idea, okay. And I may break up the piece into several sections so that there's different emotional moods in it. Then I create kind of like an overall architecture for the piece. And basically I label each melody and motif with a number or a letter, and I go around just saying, okay, this is when I want this motif to be used. I kind of list out in score form, like the different, just on non-note paper, really. I just like on a scrap piece of paper sometimes, or on an envelope sometimes, I'll list, okay, here are my motifs. Now I'm gonna also start to write the composition out in draft form. And this is where, this is the flute line, the piano line, the strings, so forth, and just kind of like plop down numbers and letters that correspond with the motifs. So overall, like once I do that, and I'm satisfied as to how it sounds in my head, then I just do the nitty gritty, puzzle work, if you know what I mean, like where you're just trying to figure out how you can make it all fit together, keeping true to your original emotional arc to the piece. So I find that a very satisfying and very expedited way of producing a work. And it's only one way, of course, of composing, but it's to me the only practical way I can do it.
Well, I think Stravinsky and Beethoven might have agreed with you.
Yeah, the whole parsimonious use of motifs is one of the things that I try to do, you know. And actually, and in a second we'll speak about, you know, pop music and stuff, but that's one thing I don't like about the average pop music, and I'm sure composers will agree, is that they'll just throw in a random thing in the middle of the piece that has nothing to do with anything else and doesn't really fit, but just to change it up. And one thing that I enjoy about classical composition of any era is the parsimonious use of motifs. So, yeah.
Well, let's talk about pop music. There's obviously a strong relationship in your music, and you know, as there was in Bach and Schubert, to the, you know, you're making music in the literate tradition, but you have a strong relationship, and as did Schubert and Bach, you relate to the non-literate tradition, to popular music.
That's right.
In what ways what do you find in pop music that helps you create your pieces? Yeah,
so, you know, I've been an avid listener of non-classical music since a young age, maybe age 9, starting with Michael Jackson and other very mainstream groups. And then in high school, my high school was actually an odd kind of achronistic bubble, because it was a residential high school and we had these dance parties, but the records were inherited from previous classes. So it started with the charter class of 1987, and I was there from 1992 to 94. So we had mostly what's called new wave or synth pop music. And that's how I actually started composing. I started composing, you know, on a computer program called what's it called? Oh my gosh. Oh yeah. SSS, Super Studio Session. It took 99K of RAM on a Mac 1 or a Mac 2. You know, it was one of those super streamlined, easy compositional things. And it wasn't recording. It was actually sample based. You could create your own instruments by, you know, recording into the microphone, and it would just kind of alter the pitch and the speed, of course, because it was very cheap. And so you just wrote out your 8 tracks. It allowed you to kind of use 8 tracks to compose. So I started off writing synth pop, and synth pop is known for its, you know, it's got a rhythm, usually, you know, some sort of 16th note bass rhythm with syncopation. Then it's got a bass line. Often it's got strings, but these are string chords that just kind of like, you know, give you the ambiance. And then it's got many motifs layered on top of that are compatible with one another. And so to me, I was like, well, what's the difference between this and classical music? Well, I didn't know at the time, of course, that, you know, well, typically there's a lot of difference, of course, at that time. But to me, it was just like composition, you know, it was like you got layers of different instruments playing different things. And so I drew from that. I get a lot of emotional, it's emotionally interesting to me to listen to a lot of non-classical music, just as it is to listen to some of the great classical works. And to me, music has to be emotionally relevant. I mean, even if it's intellectualized, if it works emotionally, great. I mean, like Arvo Pärt, for example, has a very intellectual approach. It's kind of, he's got a formula for every piece, you know, minimalist formula.
His tintinnabulation method with
exactly. But, you know, it wouldn't, if he just did that randomly and didn't care about how it feels, you know, those works wouldn't get out there, right? But the works that are, you know, like the Benjamin Britten, it's not elegy, what's the word? Anyway, Cantus in Memoriam, Benjamin Britten.
Yeah.
Super simple structure, right? Just descending scales in different lengths of time, starting at different positions, but matched.
Every part in a different tempo.
Exactly, and matched.
Which is the way gamelan works too.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
And it works. So anyway, I guess the point I was trying to make is that I seek emotionally relevant sources of inspiration, and so pop music has, if you look on like any kind of any website that's trying to organize pop music, there's like hundreds of genres, and each genre has a different emotional impact. So, but the thing about pop music is that it usually stays in that emotion for the whole piece. And it doesn't give you kind of like a interesting like way of resolving or, or riding through.
It's not a journey, it's a point in time, maybe.
Exactly. But, it's a very, some of these genres are very sophisticated in how to create that emotion. Let's take dubstep, for example. It's got such a grimy bass, like grinding at you. And, or like, I mentioned new wave, just this refreshing, grainy synth sound, grainy synth strings. They select the actual timbre to be like refreshing. And then, like, of course, hip hop, where, they're trying to get you to dance in 2 seconds. You hear something, you want to dance, right? So they're very sophisticated in creating these emotions in people.
I think the worst thing you can ever say to a composer after a concert is, "That was interesting." That's one that just makes my heart.
Right.
Have you ever used that mensural canon, that medieval mensural canon idea that's in gamelan and medieval music and in the ervo per cantus for more? Have you used that idea yourself?
Not in particular, but I did draw inspiration from that particular piece that I mentioned in a recent composition where it was actually entitled Cambria, after the Cambrian explosion, which is a point in evolutionary history where like thousands of different animal phyla suddenly appeared. And I wanted to evoke the sense of, little different organisms appearing in different, at different times. So kind of a similar approach with a descending bass line towards the end that kind of like with all these little like scintillating animal phyla appearing. And so, but yeah, I usually stick with more, I guess, a more kind of 19th century way of using motifs. Like I invert them and I, expand them and so forth. But in terms of I never have written a composition with just one motif. It's usually about 5 or 6.
Yeah, I listened to your movement from your quintet in G, the movement was called Tempo di Dance Party. Was that inspired by your high school dance parties?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's it's mostly so the rhythm is dun 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 dun. So it's got that second measure of that motif is very syncopated. A common thing that you hear in dance music and pop music is just leaving out the downbeat after a series of 16th notes, like da 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 da. Like that's not really syncopation, but that's the emphasis is on that last note rather than the beat that would have come. And I actually did my only time I presented for Cascadia, I tried to convey the difference between, say, straightening out the rhythm so it's not syncopated versus the way it is in dance music and pop music. And it's interesting, like only about a few of the composers could feel the difference. But if you ask like an average person off the street, they'd be like, and Bonnie Mix was one of these people in terms of being able to feel the difference. The straight rhythm, like I think I used New Order's Round and Round, like which the original goes like dun 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 dun, and then I straighten it out to like dun 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 dun, and you can like, and Bonnie's words was like, that sounds dorky, and that's actually exactly what most people in the last 50 years of African influenced music, with salsa being Afro-Cuban influenced and house music and dance music all having these African influences with a lot of syncopation. They're used to that. That's like how they usually get into something that like pop music is full of this. And for
back in the 50s, ragtime and other forms in American music already show.
Right. Even ragtime, so that was like in the late 1800s, right? Yeah. So it's so interesting that so I wrote that piece. That was a very easy piece to write. It was a rondo, and I just wanted to kind of have a fun ending finale to my quintet. So yeah, and then in the middle it has a melody that I stole for myself from a previous new wave song. So I've actually recorded non-classical albums. No intention to do anything, sophisticated compositionally, just creating like a piece in one mood and another piece in another mood.
Is getting performers who are used to 18th and 19th century very divisive rhythms of 1, 2, 3, 4, is getting them to understand the rhythms and play a groove instead of just counting 16th notes. Is that ever a problem for you?
Sometimes, but I've with ARCO PDX, this is a very I guess it's a particular group of musicians who definitely listen to non-classical music a lot. For example, we had a show called ARCO Goes Darkwave.
Mm-hmm.
And darkwave is a type of new wave, a type of synth-based dance music that kind of sounds a little bit not creepy, but just has like kind of a moody element to it, and most of the players
perpetual sense of foreboding.
Foreboding, yeah. There you go. So Depeche Mode is like, for example, that group, which is anybody outside of, say, a classical composing circle know who's Depeche Mode, unless they're really young, unless they're like under 30 years old or something. So Depeche Mode knows how to evoke that, and so most of the players already knew who that was, who that group was. And they can follow those rhythms and get into that mood too. So yeah, it is true. If you take say, what though, there's a lot of assumptions about classically trained players. Professional classical musicians, the ones who actually are making a living, they know all that music, all that non-classical music, like Kenji Bunch, for example. Or you take any organ symphony member. I'd like to kind of you think
there's an age component to that? Younger players do,
yeah.
And players don't, perhaps?
It might be that. It might be that too.
I know I've written pieces based on clave, clave concept,
mm-hmm.
And some older musicians who haven't really listened intensely to Caribbean music or Latin American music at all seem to confuse swing with clave, and they're not the same thing.
Not at all. No.
Yeah,
I think you're right. There's a generational component to it too.
Yeah, I wonder how much that has to do with musicians now in conservatories. They're learning non-Western music at some point in their career generally too. They play in a gamelan ensemble. They learn North Indian drumming. Or they learn, they play with a even Wawanko group or something. I wonder if they're developing different rhythmic senses too.
Yeah, it could be that, but I would guess the majority of it is just that they're also exposed to a lot of other music in their lives. And I would say of all my ARCO musicians, there was maybe only one player, a clarinetist, that really didn't feel it, but he could learn how to feel it too. So,
Let's go on and do an introduction to one of your pieces. We're going to play two pieces after we end the interview. The first one is going to be Frontline. Can you tell us about Frontline?
Yeah, so this was one of the pieces that I stuck to a very streamlined compositional style to. I basically said, screw transitions. Like, transitions are often the hardest thing for composers, right?
Oh yeah.
And I said, let's just break it up, so you got one emotion and then bam, another emotion, bam. And that's how, that's how movie music is sometimes, certain types of movie music. So, or maybe I'm saying that wrong. Maybe it's, I don't know where I got the idea, but I got it from somewhere else where it's like, and also chord changes. So like, so I draw a lot actually, even now, from Danny Elfman, from Oingo Boingo and Batman, Batman soundtracks from the early 90s, where you got a minor chord followed by a minor chord followed by a minor chord, and it's like a jarring but very mood inducing effect for a certain type of mood, right? I wrote Frontline and 2 or 3 other pieces early last year, all around the same time. I was on vacation, actually, I guess a staycation with my in-laws. And so as I was writing it, one of the emotional segments, I wanted to create some sort of vocal element to it. And so originally, I didn't even know what I was going to put in those vocals at all. All I knew was that there was going to be a rhythm to it that I had already introduced earlier. Actually, no, I just knew that I wanted a certain way of, a certain parameter, iambic, not iambic, but pentameter, a certain type of, rhythmic flow to the vocals, and that I wasn't so concerned about the content at the time. But then as I was playing around with lyrics, a very kind of resistance inspired, rebellion inspired lyrics came to me because they kind of flowed in the same way. And then then it kind of helped me with the rest of the piece, making it also very strongly resistance and rebellion kind of emotion. And at the time, I wasn't really feeling that rebellious. I mean, many of us have wanted a lot of change to occur. But at the time, it wasn't necessarily inspired from that emotion, but it kind of evolved into that.
So there was no specific political intent, just general sort of sense of overall desire for overall change.
Right. And it may be a little more radicalized than kind of, I hope for change, but more like stick it to the man kind of thing.
You have a piece with cajon I heard online, and I just was on to ask you, what is the title to that? How do you say the title?
Oh, Tolonoria 1. It was originally entitled Chamber Jam number 1. And so I used IPA to create the Chamber Jam part of it. I think I'm thinking Tolonoria 1 is the other piece we're going to talk about. But you have a piece that has the second word has a DZ. Yeah, so that's Chamber Jam, and the jam is spelled out.
I see. Okay.
Yeah,
so
it's in International Phonetic Alphabet. Yeah.
All right, IPA. I got it.
Yeah.
So, but we're gonna play Tolonoria 1.
Sure.
Tell us what the title is.
Okay, so both titles are interesting, right? So the origin of this was that at the time I was kind of with ARCO, I was a little bit frustrated because I was the driving force in terms of artistic direction, and I felt like, I wanted more voices, and yet I was dealing with people who were more of that supportive personality rather than kind of a driving personality. And that's great if you want to always be the driver, but I was kind of exhausted. So I was hoping to find other composer musicians to jam with and to create like a structure that wasn't like jazz, similar to jazz, but different in the sense that you would have distinct emotional segments to the piece, and the meters would be switching. Say it would be like 7/8 measure, then 8/8 another measure, then 7/8 8/8, or 7/4 6/4. So there'd be like a pattern, but it would be more complex and kind of throw the listener a little bit so that it was more interesting. And also the chord changes would also be interesting like that. So I got a group of musicians together. One was a drummer. He brought his cajon. And it was just because the drum set would be too loud. That's the only reason. And then I had a clarinetist and a pianist. And then eventually I was on viola, but eventually I wanted somebody else to do the string part, a cellist. And so basically that was written as a jam in several sections, and I had to actually eventually write out the improvisational part of it. Actually, you know what? I think in this particular piece, I said, forget improvisation, just stick with, so each person's motif is very similar, but you have 3 motifs happening at the same time in each of these segments. And then, if it's 1, 2, 3 in terms of the instrumentation, then the next measure, it'll be 2, 3, 1. The next measure will be 3, 1, 2. just very simple way of switching passing around the motifs. Very, very like, in your face, right? And it worked for me. At first I was like, this is too formulaic, it's gonna be too obvious that I'm just like switching around these motifs between the instruments, and they all happen on like the downbeat of this next measure and so forth. But to me, it worked emotionally too. So that was the first piece I wrote in this, and that's why I called it Chamber Jam #1. But then it also gave me the sense of a alien planet rescue mission for some reason, the arc of the piece, the emotional arc. So I tried to find some alien writing, and the only thing I could find is, our International Phonetic Alphabet on Earth just makes it look like alien language. So that's why I wrote it out in IPA.
But for that one, we're going to play Tonal Aria 1, which is a different piece, though.
Same piece, but so Tolonoria, Tolono and RA.
Yes.
But just the last 2 or 3 letters of the instruments involved. So clarinetto, cello, piano, batteria, for drums. I just wanted to find something that sounded like an alien planet. So that was the whole intent. And then if you look at the recordings, I have a recording on, it's not on SoundCloud, it's on, it's on several different locations like CD Baby and so forth. The graphic, I used an alien planet landscape, and I altered it to, just a little bit, so it's not so obvious that, anyway. So I was, in my mind, the emotional element of the piece was that, you had this, you had this fight between like just imagine some sort of Star Wars theme, and like, the Empire is coming in towards this planet, and you have a group of rebels that are trying to save the baby creatures on this planet and take them out. So that's the emotional arc of the piece.
Well, thank you very much, Mike Hsu. I hope I get to hear more of your music soon, and I hope soon I'll be able to get out of the house and I'll be able to get up to Portland and hear some of your music live up there.
I hope so.
Thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome. Take care.
to explain in so many words. You can't just look away or claim you didn't know or blame your stupid luck. Let's not mess around, just take a good look around. You'll get a sense of what those greedy pigs have done to our lives. This isn't right, in fact it's absurd. We can't just be sitting ducks, we can't just let it go or settle down. It's time we make a move, it's time we take control. Let's do it right, let's do it now.